Chapter 1. Okhrana Sveta.
Come in, Damian. You reading me?
A tired and hopeless voice pulses through the static of an aging radio.
Loud and clear, Felix. Loud and clear.
Damian responds before speaking again.
How close are you to the glacier?
Felix's voice sounds like an excerpt from a Leonid Trauberg film as Damian leans closer to the radio.
Not close enough, Damian. I've still got 200 meters until I reach the base of it.
Okay, friend. Keep trudging.
The two are at a research outpost, Okhrana Sveta 4, a geophysics research post at the looming foot of the giant Lambert Glacier. Damian sits amongst the bleeps and bloops and flashing lights of the equipment-ridden outpost, while Felix, once colleague turned friend, braves the cold and violent winds of the Antarctic. The partnership was once a trio, but Dittmer, the third researcher, had to be taken away for an unexpected medical examination.
Why are Lambton making us collect more samples? They must think this job is easy.
Felix declares, again battling with the darting frozen winds of the region, placing one foot in front of the other as if they were stone.
Besides, we measure seismic activity. We're not supposed to be measuring contents with ice cores.
Contamination, Felix. You know this.
Damian utters, knowing their complaints will bring little fortune.
Ha! Contamination? I collected them, brought them back, and sent them off.
The results were certainly odd. If the reports were true, more than simply a third researcher would be needed to settle the issue.
All while you sat in your comfy chair, sipping on tea, watching seismic graphs.
Felix's diagnosis is far from inaccurate. Damian does indeed sit in a nice comfy chair, watching graphs and sipping on tea, but occasionally adds a comforting grin to his routine, knowing his partner is facing the winds with no tea to hand.
You are the hands and I am the brain, Felix. This is life.
Damian mocks as he leans back.
No, Damian, you are the arse. That is life.
Time passes and the weather worsens.
To hell with it! I forgot my water, Damian!
Felix, now tiring and clearly dehydrated, shouts through the radio. The sound of wind battles harder with the sound of Felix's voice. Damian's window fills with hurrying winds and frantic snow.
Maybe you're right. Maybe you should be the one sipping tea while I go and collect the samples. Maybe then things would start going right around here.
Damian responds in a mocking tone, pulling that same comforting grin he parades so often. Felix laughs in disbelief before speaking once more.
With your physique, Damian, ha! We're better off changing careers.
Felix begins speaking again, but with an unusual hint of unease in his voice.
I'm going to have to drink out here, Damian, but those filters don't work properly, and I don't want hypothermia, or whatever the hell Dittmer got from it.
Felix's authoritative tone is overpowered by his lack of choice as he paces forwards.
I'm nearly at the glacier's base, Damian.
Felix reports, assuming that his partner's thoughts have wandered elsewhere.
Damian!
Sorry, I'm here.
Damian replies as he dives back into his chair.
Something weird happened, Felix. The needle moved. You felt anything?
Only thirst, brother. If only Lambton made snow too, huh?
Felix replies as he melts snow and drinks the results.
Lambton water, Lambton energy. What's next, Lambton lure?
Damian chuckles to himself before responding in a quizzical tone.
Hopefully better Lambton equipment.
He turns to his monitor, confused.
This seismometer's lost it. You sure you don't feel anything?
The only thing rumbling is my stomach, brother. Dittmer drank too, and we haven't heard from medical.
Felix declares in a concerned manner.
Dittmer was always ill, Felix. Don't worry.
Damian, trying to reassure his friend, grows skeptical. If anything were to happen to Felix, he would have to brave the cold that he too often avoids, trudging through the snow, helpless. When Dittmer was relieved of duty, Damian and Felix requested another researcher. Their requests, however, failed as Lambton Energy's corporate gaze was focused elsewhere.
Okay, Damian, I am here.
Felix pauses as he gears up to make the ascent.
Wow, I forgot how beautiful she is. Best job in the world, eh? Make sure...
Another sudden stabbing of static triggers as the radio cuts off.
Felix? Felix!
Damian probes hopelessly.
Damn it.
He mutters, while fiddling with the radio, attempting to reconnect. As hard as he tries to concentrate, memories of an isolated, young Demyan invade his mind. Although his childhood was that of a pressured young man, the fondness of isolation, cut off from the distractions of the world, had a strange appeal yet. Demyan, 13 years old, reads in his torchlit room at night. He covers his head with his duvet, reading the costly book on contagions he saved up for. As he reads, his father and mother argue. The almost comical sound of hand-slapping faces invade Demyan's thoughts. In the early 20th century, science was sufficiently sophisticated to anticipate the influence. The screams subside. His father, a prominent geophysicist, now sits asleep downstairs at the kitchen table, with a glass of pepper vodka in hand. The perfect time for Demyan to read. The young scientist's fascination with virology would pave the way for his love of science, but all passions are accompanied by hardship. In this case, Demyan's father. Demyan's father saw no use in his viral fixation, and instead pushed him towards a more appropriate and worthwhile career in geophysics. Demyan regrets his lack of resistance and remembers his falling tears, but in the midst of raging Arctic storms and rampant uncertainty, in his memories at least, he felt safer then. The storm thickens. Anxious still, Demyan's failures in reconnecting to Felix have led him to reread the report on the contaminated samples. He had tried and failed in plucking up the courage to brave the storm. Instead, he rests on the hope and assumption of it being unnecessary.
Felix is fine. After all, equipment failure is common in the world of research,
he thinks. Demyan refocuses, opening the report and remembering the odd accounts from the nearby samples lab. Certain viruses can live in frozen conditions, but the report suggested similarities to hemorrhagic and macular-inducing viral infections, an oddity for anywhere, let alone ice samples in the Antarctic. The envelope reads, "Confidential, property of Lambton Energy Corp." Demyan pulls the letter out carefully and begins reading. "It is my regret to inform you that these samples appear to contain mass amounts of single-strand RNA genomes, an unusual finding that could only be the result of contamination. These genomes, however, have been reported to contain an array of viral cells. These include..." The radio beside him clicks, interrupting Demyan. A quiet crackle spawns from its speaker as winds press against the thick window. Demyan leans in to listen. Amidst the static and Arctic wind, he can hear breathing. Long, drawn-out breaths, animalistic in nature. "Felix?" Demyan speaks. "Is it you?" His voice breaks as he swallows his nerves and clenches his jaw. The ghostly breaths draw longer and louder as the clinking of the needle beside him grows livelier. He looks away from the radio towards the needle, troubled as to where his focus should be. He moves his hand to the radio, readying a response. Just as Demyan begins to inquire once more, a piercing scream shrieks from the radio and echoes through the outpost. As Demyan recoils, throwing the report and toppling his desk, the seismometer needle trembles, as if it too is afraid. Correct in its prediction, a sudden rumble breaches and shakes the ground, and loose objects dart around the room as if to attack Demyan. As he braces, hitting the floor, sheets of paper rain down beside him. As he crawls under a nearby desk, holding his knees and bowing his head, he can't help but think of those lonely torchlit nights, hidden away from a drunk father and a regretful mother. The quake subsides.
"Come on, Demyan. Get up! Get up!"
Demyan utters to himself in frustration, lips trembling, hands shaking. Thoughts of his friend out there in the snow whirl around his mind. Was that Demyan screaming? Maybe he's dead. Killed by a creature of the Antarctic. What next? Demyan could take it no longer. He gets up, ready to embark into the void, so afraid of what may lay ahead. After he steps out, the heavy metal door draws shut behind him as he bitterly embraces the equally as heavy wind.
"Felix! Felix!"
He calls on his handheld radio as he clutches the strap on his bag and plows forwards. As time passes and the weather worsens, Demyan nears the glacier. The closer he gets, the more damage he sees. The quake has caused chunks of solid ice to flee from the glacier, plaguing the path to his friend. As piercing winds whistle and carve around these mammoth blocks, water flows around Demyan's boots, rising to his ankles. With each tired step, he shouts for Felix.
"Felix! Where are you?"
Upon his third call, he gets an unwanted response, a shriek like no other, seemingly incapable of stemming from human lungs. Timid, he creeps onwards, driven by desperation. The appeal of isolation has worn cold. Step after step, breath after breath, he reaches the base of the glacier. A trail of blood on the ice shimmers like ruby rock as another trail seeps into the thick layers of snow beside it. As he steps forward, battling with the winds and ice, he hears breathing, the same ungodly breathing that echoed through that crackling radio. As he moves around the corner of a large cut in the glacier, he sees Felix. He moves closer to him. Blood covers his face and seeps out of his skin onto the white canvas surrounding him. Demian sees Felix's eyes, blood red, scratched and glowing through the white mist. His breathing is layered with cries as blood flows like tears from his pupils. "Felix!" Demian calls in one last hope of humanity as the ground beneath him begins shaking once more. Felix stretches his hand out, reaching for Demian, but his calls for help are screams of horror. Staring into the glowing eyes of his friend, surrounded by the now falling glacier, Demian thinks of home one more time.